deeper right now and go also to Capedo, where it seems there is a band-aid solution as far as stemming that particular insecurity is concerned there. The underlying issues seem to be the land and pasture in Capedo, which is exacerbating the flare-ups in Capedo. So far, 3 police officers have died. Brigadier, were you surprised by this? And do you think the measures that have been put in place speedily as it is, are they just band-aid solutions, or we can have more robust solutions that can actually stem this situation on the ground in Capedo?
First, our condolences to the soldiers who lost their lives in the course of duty. It's very unfortunate that this did happen to these troops who were actually providing security to the entire area. But issue of timing, this is not something new around the Chumulingot, Capedo, Kainuta routes, the border between Samburu, Turkana, and Baringo. In fact, Capedo is on the border, right on the border. And therefore, no surprise that this happened. It should have happened in the first place, however. But it is encouraging that the actual target that was aimed for was not achieved. The aim wasn't our own security forces. The aim was the other community, which is across the border. And therefore, to me, this is a plan that has gone wrong. A plan that has gone wrong on those who planned it. And let's get this very clear, that issues in what we call the Kapotu Triangle, Karamojong, Turkana, Pokot Triangle, has 3 main dimensions. And pasture is a minor one. Pasture is a minor one. The main one is cattle rustling. The time comes when they move across to go and steal from others. Of course, there's the smaller angle where I want to see the warrior spirit in the young men when they're about to marry. And therefore, you go out there and cut as many as you can and bring to your bride and say, here I am, I'm a man, I'm a hero, and the junior case. But the key issue here is the element of timing. It is seasonal, and therefore cattle rustling becomes the main issue. For quite some time, the government has done very well in this area, both in terms of the police forces and the military forces. In fact, for a long time, we have been around the Chilimungot, Capedo, Lumelo areas, both in terms of security forces and also providing development issues. The military has built dams around Lumelo. I've been there myself to see dams being built. We have provided security. We have provided outposts for chiefs to come and provide that control.
Yes.
But this does still happen. What is the issue? The issue lies squarely in the population. And I've always said, it lies in the population and the local leadership. When these things are planned, the local population across both sides know it has been planned and it's going to happen. And to address it, the government has done very well, but we must work very closely with the population to ensure they play their rightful role in terms of avoiding such practices. I say some traditional, which can be actually overcome now, and we move better. But in terms of security posts and all that, I know we have done very well. I know soldiers have done very well. In fact, things like Suguta Valley is history now. It used to be very, very bad in Baringo, in Samburu, very bad. It's not been controlled. And therefore, I want to see it as an isolated incident that has happened, picking on history, and the fact that it's been peaceful for a while, taking advantage of that to try and inflict casualties on the other side. Yes.
But we can also look at the vulnerability of the residents there. The resultant insecurity has forced most of them to be getting transport from the police officers' vehicles as it is. And so maybe this also puts the police officers in a very vulnerable situation, or even the residents themselves. If you say they were targeting, the other communities and not the police officers, could they also be targeting these particular people who travel, using these police vehicles as well? Because that is the only mode of transport as it is right now. I think that was an issue that was raised before.
Yeah, but normally the incidents of attack on security forces is not in this manner. It happens in terms of when you pursue them after the incident, and you pursue them, then they put ambushes. Instead of them coming up and putting ambushes out of nothing, it's not normal. It's quite a different. And then in this target, the aim is not, as you said, when you have the civilians moving in security vehicles, that's not the aim for civilians. They can get them better in their villages, not in terms of on the road and all
right,
that.
Thank you. Right. Dr. Hassan Honenche.
It's not the first time this has happened in this area, and it is sad that we lost a police officer, but also there are civilians who lost their lives in there. Now, I think the government has a program in terms of disarming some of these communities, but when communities are forgotten for a very long time, they start relying on themselves. Now, I think we've said in this program that in terms of the long-term solutions, these communities need to be given an alternative livelihood. Cattle rustling cannot be, it's not a sustainable economic, livelihood that you can be able to bank on, because then conflict is going to continue. The availability of small arms proliferation among these communities, it is so high that unless you do something about it, you're actually not going to stop it. Now, we know that there have been efforts to confiscate arms from citizens. But then when we do that, I think it's important for us to remember we need to be able to provide them with security so they don't feel vulnerable. The conflict, when we have those in Turkana and Baringo, a lot of communities are going to be resistant to disarm when they think perhaps they're not, the other party perhaps is going to either arm or rearm itself, or it's actually armed already. And so we cannot be able to stop this unless, number one, we actually engage in a disarmament program. Number two, we provide these people with an alternative economic livelihood. So the kind of fights that exist, whether it's over pasture or cattle rustling, does not actually continue. Outside that, is going to be increasingly difficult for us to stop this menace that has been going on for decades, and it's just taking lives of Kenyans, destroying property, and in the 21st century Kenya. And one thing that we hope, even as we move towards changing the way the structure of government, the way we share resources, that perhaps certain attention should be paid to some of these pastoral communities in how can we be able to help them in a way that can actually transition to a different way of living, so they don't have to always to see their neighbors as a potential booty people, so they can go and loot and engage in cattle rustling for survival.
Okay.
Yeah, Dibal, by and large, I think the security agencies have worked very hard to contain these challenges. A few years back, the entire area from Suguta, Marmar, Baragoi, and others, the clashes there were so intense. We recall when we lost about 42 police officers in one of the biggest single massacres by the Pocots. And even when the president went there, the Pocot leaders were saying they did not intend to target the police, they were targeting the other community. And this takes us to the point that General retired Ahmed has talked about. It's targeting the other community. And that seems to be the problem and the challenge that actually we still have today. Kapedo is an area that is still claimed by both Turkana County and Baringo County. So first and foremost, is a border issue, it's a boundary issue between the two counties, and the two communities that border, that live in Kapedo on the other side of Turkana is, of course, the Turkanas, and on this side are the Pocots. Turkanas and Pocots have always been clashing with each other for a very long time, and there's this historical enmity between those two because of course, cultural practices like cattle rustling. Before, they used to use spears. The warriors would go around and get as many cattle as they can using the spears, but now they are armed with much more sophisticated weapons and therefore much more deadly. In terms of resolving this issue, the government should do the same thing that it did in Baragoi, in Suguta, Marmara, and the other areas. And one of the other ways to do it is the long-term plan. Education, alternative sources of livelihoods, a way to engage other than just herding a few heads of cattle and goats. Education is key in this regard, Dibal. And these areas, the pastoral areas, and it's not just in Kapedo and that areas, it transcends right across the northern Kenya. There needs to be a Marshall Plan to address this kind of insecurity in essentially pastoralist areas. What politicians are dealing with right now, with all the politicking around BBI, is unhelpful. They should be dealing, or the discussion should be how to address this kind of issues.
Right, thank you. Irungu Houghton.
I think we have to come back to Gado's cartoon or illustration. Extremely perceptive.
Okay, let me just put it up, then we discuss it. Yes?
No, I think for many of us, having read the BBI report, having listened to the various rallies that have happened, we have to be very careful that the energy that is the political energy that's going into essentially dealing with a political electoral issue does not derail governance for the next 2 years. There is a real danger that BBI becomes a distraction from the things that are actually pressing us as a country. And I think this one particularly, I don't know if we can go into the Locust issue more broadly. Is that okay? So just looking at the Locust issue, I was kind of, because we've enjoyed it, it has been a source of ridicule, and in typical Kenyan fashion, we have had a lot of fun either talking about the way that it's being handled and so on. But I think if we come back to it as a national security issue, there are a number of things we need to be clear about. One is, of course, that this is not just a Kenyan problem. It is a regional problem. So Ethiopia and other countries on our borders have been struggling with this. The second issue is that you know, the number of locusts, and I saw this figure which really perplexed me. You know, it's something like, so historically this is probably the greatest locust invasion in Kenyan history for the last 70 years.
Correct.
It is also the greatest locust invasion in terms of Ethiopia, and I think it's Somalia, for the last 25 years. So it is not an unremarkable event, right? And I don't think it is of biblical proportions, just to come to that side. I don't think God is trying to teach us a lesson.
Yes.
However, if we do not respond to it, you know, with alacrity and with decisiveness.
I mean, the toads are not going to fall from the sky next
time. Yeah, when toads start falling from the sky, we need to be worried. But we do need to recognize that we're talking about like 200 billion insects that are essentially moving across an area of about 2,400 kilometers. I mean, it is huge as an epidemic. Now, my fellow panelists.
So we cannot really, you know, take this to be also what really happened in Egypt with the plague. We had all those, the swarm of locusts. The seven. We're not given an exact figure.
No, but I mean, it is huge. I mean, there's some conversation about maybe they need to divert from, where is it, from Makueni and Machakos, Aninja is telling me, and maybe move to Western. But I don't want to say that on air because they might be listening. Locusts could be watching this program right now. And also the people of Western will suggest that I have ill motive. But I think what the other point about this is that we need something like about $70 million to basically do aerial pesticide spraying. Right? So it is a costly affair to do this scientifically and to do this professionally and in a modern way. And I think that is the challenge of locusts. And coming back to BBI, I would love BBI to spend 1 minute, 2 minutes with some practical suggestions and the exercise of the amount of political power that we saw on the stage, either in Naivasha or in Mombasa, in Parliament, calling on our government essentially to find the resources to fight this.
Can I add just something quickly? I think, Debal, that probably we're trying to skirt the issue of security around the BBI. We're going back to the days of ODM and PNU in 2007. The formations of our tribal chieftains is massive. And you could see the red lines being drawn already for the 2022 elections. And it is our responsibility here to point out some of the things that are coming down the road. And I think that if everybody welcomes the BBI, everybody wants this inclusion, and we as Kenyans and as patriots want to get over this nonsense that comes up every time we have an election, and the Matatu boys and the bus boys masquerading as members of parliament go on TV and say pathetic things that really cause insecurity. So, you know, the internal security minister is a tough young man from over there in Nyanza. And I really think that this is this time for him to shine and to show that the population of Kenya should not be subjected to any kind of, comments and political action that is going to cause tribalism, division, which is precisely what the BBI doesn't want to do. And the last point, Debal, is, I mean, this government here in Kenya today, led by the Jubilee, you know, there's something wrong that's going on, because the deputy president and the president are singing from two different lines, Debal. And that is a security issue for us as well.
Thank you.
And that ought to stop.
Thank you, thank you. I think we'll dwell on that much later, but let's just streamline ourselves on Kapedo as it is right now. Ambassador.
I was going to comment on the Locust, but perhaps I can take the two
Sure,
of them.
the Locust
and the Kapedo. There is something that the General said which I want to pick up on, and the way he talked about the security architecture in terms of how you handle a situation like Kapedo, which is so complicated. I think we have tended to use the gun to come and look for the young men who are involved, or the young women, and shoot them around and then say peace and walk away and create posts here, police, and plant them and say there is security. We need to go back to the drawing board and think about it separately. Of course, some suggestions that have been made, economic intervention, but also the security architecture. We have said time and again here that if you don't involve the people, and that's exactly what the General said, let the people own this process. Let it be owned. I mean, why do you, I always talk about Ethiopia, how they have been able to insulate themselves successfully in a number of ways to keep away even terrorist attack. It is because the security architecture involves the people, And I think even this thing we have talked about devolution. Where is the devolution of that area to agree on this boundary, to agree on economic intervention so that you can be able to address people? Because we can't be doing this from Nairobi. A security situation arises, CS flies from Nairobi, comes here, and then you fly away. That's why there are all these helicopters showing people running away, but they see helicopters above them. I think that is something that we really need to address, and let's go back to the security architecture. In fact, one of the things I sent you some booklet which has an issue on how security architecture should be addressed, to approach it from the human security, not state security. That is a fundamental fault line that we have always had. Turning on to the locust, this particular attack of locusts actually started way back in 2018. This generation that is here, way back in Arabian Peninsula. And the reason for it is because there was these cyclones. Why cyclones? A huge cyclone that has not been seen in that area. It's climate change. And then it created a perfect environment for it to breed. And once they're out of that, it's like this virus we talked about. So it's a virus in a way, but of insects. But having invaded us, there is the question, how do you mitigate now? There is a Center for Locust Control, which is based in Addis.
Very good point.
In fact, the person that is there is a Kenyan, Dr. Njoka. I heard him talk about it on the BBC the other day. I mean, if we had been funding this institution, if we had had enough, we would have spent less than maybe 10 million, 30 million, 40 million for the entire region, and we contain it. But we waited too late. Again, we didn't even share the information. When it came to Ethiopia, we all kept quiet. We all slept on our job, even here. We would have then split and created the barriers along that. So I think it's a lesson for us to learn. But in terms of the damage it's going to cause, it's going to be huge. Because to contain this thing now, they say it is going to take no less than 6 months. It moves 150 kilometers a day. Imagine, it would have gone all these areas. Imagine the destruction it's going to leave behind. It's horrendous.
But let's just also gravitate towards, the disarmament, and we have all this amnesty. It's not expired yet, has it? Right? For people now to just, voluntarily, bring back their guns, and the government has been very clear that once this expires, then there'll be, a forced disarmament. Is it the prime solution? Because I think they've really been carried out on this particular vein of thought of trying to disarm the people of that particular region, but nothing has really come to the fore. So will a forced disarmament also really work, Hassan mentioned?
I think that was partly my suggestion with regard to disarmament, that we had to move to make sure these communities are disarmed. But I think what I emphasized was when we disarm, what are we leaving behind? Because it's impossible to achieve 100% disarmament. You could get one of my rifles, but perhaps I have 3 more. Or because of the nature of those communities, it's easy for them to get, firearms from other places. and so they can re-arm.
But I think
Now,
that the suggestion was them to have a collective East African, disarmament, forced disarmament. So
Yeah,
will that also really try and help the situation?
It can backfire. The best disarmament is actually when communities are willing to buy into it and they realize and recognize that they need to disarm. But then the security of the property has to be guaranteed. After that, because I can promise you, if we disarm today, I'm not saying us, I'm saying assuming I belong to those, you live in those areas, and then a month later or 2 weeks later, there's a community that comes and they steal your cattle. The next logical thing you're going to do is actually look for more arms, more AK-47s and stuff like that. And so I think they have to combine both. There has to be an incentive for them to disarm, but at the same time, I think the law in Kenya is also very clear. Citizens are not supposed to be wielding private, rifles and arms. And so we have put to apply law, but also understand the context in which we're applying this law to make sure that we don't leave a vacuum that is actually going to create more problems. I don't believe in citizens walking around with firearms. Some of them you have seen, including members of parliament, busy shooting people in clubs. and so citizens should not have arms. However, these communities, they have a history, and I think we should be careful in the way we go about it. But ultimate objective is that all citizens, except for very, very few perhaps who are licensed to own firearms because of whatever reasons, they should not have firearms. But then as a country, we have to be able to provide them with security and an alternative source of livelihood so they don't think about stealing other people's cows.
Right.
Apart from the Al-Shabaab issue, this is the biggest threat we have in terms of small arms in Kenya. And this situation is unique and manageable. Unique and manageable in the sense that this is a purely Kenyan affair. There's no external hand. Those boys who are doing this are Kenyans who live in villages, who live with chiefs and local population. It's not unique. It's again the issue of cultural practices. What we need to do, in fact, is a special DDR. Special, because this is a unique situation. And what we need to do is build on the security system. And it should be an intelligence-led operation. I can assure you, I'll go back into the point and say again, the local leaders in the area know exactly what is going on. They know who own arms. They know where they are. They know when to strike and when to plan. That's not a secret. And that's why sometimes we are forced to go in and conduct forced DDR, which is not the best way to go. The best way to go is to make it simple, deal with the people, find better livelihoods, and engage the local leaders to bring out this. They don't bring out these arms. They don't. They don't cooperate as required. What we did this time with the former PC, Mohamed Saleh, is exactly what we need to do. Put the problem squarely on our leaders. So they must bring this to an end, work with them, the population, and I'm sure we'll succeed.
Right.
Quickly, about the country since colonial times has been ruled by the Chiefs Act and the provincial administration. Remember, they had the colonial hat as well.
Yes, big cups, yeah.
The whole infrastructure over security, when we want to respond with chiefs and the provincial administration. And this is not the way to do security in the 21st century. So what the people of Kapedo and Pokot are doing, they're rustling these cows, and then we're eating nyama choma in Nairobi from Pokot. And,
yes.
It's a fact, we just don't need to skirt over the issue. It's a money-making thing, and all the nyama choma joints know that the best meat comes from cattle rustling in Pokot. So what the people need in Pokot and Kapedo and all those people are jobs. They need a Yaya center over there. They need schools. They need hospitals, and they will put their guns down and get go and work and go to school, and the movement will happen. I mean, we should not respond to Kenyan citizens with the Chiefs Act. We should not respond to them with the tribal police. Remember, this is how the colonial system used to do that with the natives. What we need is development, and we have counties there, and we ought to hold the governors there responsible for what is it that the transfers of money that are going to the county doing for people in Kapedo, doing for people in Turkana. That's the kind of things we have. Turkana has oil. I mean, the first shipment of oil went to the coast to be set up. Did that money go down to the people to create playground schools, hospitals, modernizing institutions that can grab these people from their cultural milieu, and so that this violence can stop? We ought to start thinking like we're in the 21st century and not in the colonial Kenya.
All right.
We have done this before. In fact, I remember very well, way back around 1998, we went in with a major program, government program, where we were putting up centers, established centers. We are putting up boreholes. We are preparing roads to allow for communication. What happened? Some of the boreholes to date have not been used because the other side comes and throws stones in there, and then you're in trouble. The other side. Yet on the other side, you have done the same thing. You've done on this side, on the Turkana side, Baringo side, and whenever the other side comes across and blocks that borehole. It's an issue of mentality, that they can't find room for living together peacefully. And this is a major and massive government. We have done much in the past. Let's focus again on them and look at much more development and how people can live together peacefully.